Hello, Blossoming Speaker, and welcome to another episode of the Blossoming Speaker podcast. Did you know there is a version of listening that most of us do, where we hear the words, we track the topic, we prepare our response, and we even look like we are listening because we nod, we make the right sounds, and we patiently wait for our turn. But I want to talk about a different kind of listening today. This is the kind that I think changes the shape of a conversation. It's when you experience it on the receiving end. It makes you feel like someone just handed you more room to breathe. That kind, when you practice it on the offering end, makes your presence stand out in every room you walk into without you asking for it. That kind, when you practice it on the offering end, makes your presence stand out in every room you walk into without you asking. I want to talk about listening that goes beneath the surface of what someone is saying to what they are actually trying to communicate. The act of listening to understand the meaning being exchanged. In my coaching work, I see the cost of surface level listening all the time. For example, a sales representative hears the objection and responds to the stated reason, the price, the timing, the hesitation, without ever pausing to consider what might be underneath it. An employee in a restructure watches their manager deliver the new strategy with polish and efficiency, maybe with a bit of extra gusto and determination, while the team quietly absorbs what the words are not saying, and then they draw their own conclusion. Another example are business owners, where they ask their team or themselves or clients for honest feedback and get a polished agreement because the culture or the perspective that you have quietly trained for yourself or the people around you basically says that this kind of honesty cannot be exchanged. In each of these situations, the listening that is happening is transactional. It processes the content and it misses the connection. And this matters in context of everything we have been building across these episodes at the Blossoming Speaker podcast, because change does not just disrupt our circumstances, it disrupts how we communicate too. When people are experiencing change, the kind that shifts who you are, that makes the familiar unfamiliar, they are often not saying everything they mean. They are saying as much as they trust the room to hold. And the room can only hold what the listening in it makes possible. Now, I learned this the hard way during a period where I was navigating significant change in my own life and work. I discovered that I had been listening to the people around me with one layer of my attention, the top layer, the one that tracks whether things sound okay, whether the conversation is moving the right direction, mostly according to my perspective, and whether I need to respond or can let it continue. I was not listening for what they were not saying. I was not curious about what was underneath the surface. And this cost me. Conversations that I thought had gone well left people feeling unheard. Relationships I thought were steady had quietly shifted. Opportunities to understand what was actually happening in my work, with my clients, in my own journey, were passing me by because I was only listening at the surface level I was comfortable with. Now, that is not easy to admit, but I need to share it because it happens more regularly. And I learned that the more conscious I became about this surface level of listening, the more I actively decided to engage in the listening to understand approach. Now, this listening to understand is a type of deep listening, and it can be uncomfortable. It requires you to slow down at the exact moment every instinct inside of you is urging you to hurry up and respond. It asks you to stay in the silence after someone finishes speaking rather than feeling it. Yes. And that silence does feel like a long time, doesn't it? It demands that you be genuinely curious about the person in front of you, not just curious enough to keep the conversation moving, but curious enough to discover something you did not already assume. Here is what I noticed when this kind of deep listening happens. The other person changes. Not in a manufactured way because a public speaking technique was applied to them, but because they realized they were genuinely being heard. And that does something real inside not only the person being heard, but when you see that in their eyes, in their approach to you, it does something real within you as well. It softens the defensive posture that change has created around us. It creates space for the actual meaning to emerge rather than the managed version. And it shifts the conversation from an exchange of positions to an exploration of real meaning. This is where I believe that the equation of 1 + 1 could equal 3 or more. Here is what happens to the listener. When you stop preparing your response and start generally receiving what someone is offering with deeper listening, you get better information. That means you are able to make better decisions. You begin to notice things that you would have missed if you stayed at that surface level listening. And you become the kind of presence that people trust with the real version of what they are experiencing. In change, this is not a soft skill. You may think of it as a survival skill, but I believe that engaging in deeper listening or listening to understand is actually the zone where you thrive and you grow more into who you are. The person who can listen beneath the surface of a difficult conversation when time says you don't have time, or who can hear the fear underneath the objection, the uncertainty underneath the pushback, or the opportunity underneath the resistance. That is the person who goes through change with more traction. Now, is this the kind of person you would like to be? This is a decision that I've decided that I do want to continue to be this person. It means that I need to consciously make this decision frequently because it becomes so easy to slip into the habit of surface listening, especially with external pressures or a deep habit of practicing surface listening. Making that decision regularly and committing to that decision regularly of applying the deep listening means that you get better at it and that becomes your new habit over time. Here is one simple place to start. The next time someone finishes speaking in a conversation that matters, before you respond, pause. Now, not theatrically or just for a big breath. Pause quietly and ask yourself, what else might be in what they just said? And here it is. That is where deep listening begins.